Want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. And I am done. Okay, so I just finished up reading Snuff by Terry Pratchett. This is part of the Discworld series, and I wanted to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing this book, which was just right now. So I'm going to go ahead and sadly give this book a 3 out of 5, meaning I liked it, but I can't really say much more positive things than that. It was a good book, but you know, it's a very bittersweet book because this is the end of my Discworld journey. I do recognize that there is one more Discworld book after this, but I can't bear to get to it. It's just too sad. It's sad because, as most of you that are watching this probably know, and very few of my viewers will end up watching my Discworld reviews, so those that are watching are probably Discworld fans, but you probably know that Terry Pratchett that died relatively quickly after he wrote this book. He wrote one more. He wrote, I believe it's Raising Steam, and then passed away pretty quickly after that. He might have passed away during it, and they finished it up without him. I'm not quite sure on the timeline, though. But he had early onset Alzheimer's. I don't really know how to say it. But it's sad because you can see in this book that he very much had it. And it makes me think about my own life. One of my grandmas passed away from that, and you know, going through thinking about constantly through this book, that reminder was not a great feeling reading a book, and it's clear that you know it's going downhill, the quality of these books, and I shouldn't necessarily say the quality. It's just a lot of the great things about Discworld weren't really evident here. Now, let me start with the positives, though. This book was funny. And I got a number of good laughs. It's kind of not the, you know, laugh out loud, but constantly smiling, having a relatively good time throughout most of this book. And there's just some genuinely witty stuff here. And, you know, I got to spend more time with some of my favorite characters. This is part of the Night's Watch crew. So this one followed mainly Sam Vimes, who I love. It did not follow as much the rest of the crew, which is sad because I find those side characters to be the most entertaining part of any of these books in this sequence. And they were in it, but it felt kind of shoehorned in because the book took place somewhere else. The book here, Sam Vimes is married, he has a child, and they decide that they need to take their son on a vacation out to their vacation home, out into the countryside, and it's spending time out there. A murder mystery happens, which you would expect in any of these books involving Sam Vimes, and he, even though he's on vacation, has to figure out how to solve it. So those are all really positive things, right? Well, so what's the downside? The downside is part of what's amazing about Discworld is that these books are not long. They're relatively short. I feel like on average they're in that 300 to 500 page realm, probably more like 300 to 400 pages on most of them, which may feel long if you're coming to this from any other genre but fantasy. But if you're a fantasy fan, you'll know that fantasy books have a tendency to get into that 600 plus range very frequently. And you can see even some of the most famous fantasy authors regularly pumping out books that are 1,000 plus pages. So to do that with a few amount of pages and to be able to have such success is one of the things that stands Terry Pratchett apart, because you know, there's probably a very smart way to say this in a concise way, but I don't really have the words in my head at the moment. But it's harder to write really concise writing than it is to just put all the words out there. You know, that's a difficult thing, and that wasn't here in Snuff. Snuff is a long book. It's north of 600 pages. I don't have the page count on me because I have locations in my book, but which are not the same thing as pages, but it's by far the longest Discworld book that I've ever read. And I've read them all, so this is the longest one. And so he just lacked that ability to close out a thought. And I'm glad I read it, because it's going to make me doing a reread of a lot of these books. I'm going to appreciate them a lot more, because I feel like I'm going to have a greater appreciation for what he was able to accomplish through a vast majority of his career into writing these immensely impactful, funny, politically astute, great social commentaries, wonderful satires in a tight little package. That's not easy to do. And so, yeah, I appreciate that a lot more having read this book. But there were these long, drawn-out scenes where it just didn't feel like Discworld. You know, there was a moment rather early on in the book where he is going through a cave, and essentially going from point A to point B to meet some characters, and then he's going to leave the cave. And that sequence took like 100 pages. That is not Terry Pratchett. That's not what he does. It should have been 20 at most. And it's not that it dragged on for what any other fantasy book would do. It's just it dragged on for what Terry Pratchett is and what he has come to be able to master. You know, so yeah, I'm glad I read it. And you know, if this was any other book other than, you know, the tail end and I gave it a 3 out of 5, I'd be more disappointed than I am. But yeah, it's just, you know, very bittersweet. I'm going to be done with my Discworld journey. I will go back and do some rereads eventually. Not anytime soon. I want to forget some of the things that made me laugh so hard. I want to forget some of these things before I go back and refresh myself. That's my kind of reread style. I know a lot of people are I want to reread it while it's still in my mind. And yeah, not me. I want to put years and years between my reads. I get a lot more enjoyment out of that. So I don't have a lot more to say. You know, it's a good book. Should you read it? If you're a Discworld fan, absolutely. You know, but if you're doing these reads where you're going to read like all of one sequence, like all of the Night's Watch books, you know, I don't know that you should read this one. Maybe save it. You know, I read these books all chronologically, and that's not the way that most people would recommend you read them. I did, and for that read style, yes, you absolutely should read it when it's in its order. Now, I'm probably going to have some, you know, Discworld aficionados that say I need to finish it off. You know, I've read them all. I might as well just end it. But I know I'm not going to enjoy it. I know it's just going to make me disappointed and sad. And is that why I read books? No, it's not. I want to enjoy my time. And, you know, sadly, a decent amount of this book I didn't enjoy. Now, luckily, I did enjoy enough of it to be able to appreciate my read, but that's where I'm at. So I'm going to end this, do an epically short review. So that's where I'm at, and thank you so much for giving me your time, and happy reading to you. Thanks again to my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier patrons, Ben, CJ, Dan Newt, Darren, Jamie, Michael Sugarman, My Book is Lit, Romeo Mike, Ron Reich, Russell, and Sky.